Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Barry and I again for another chat this week. This week, we were thinking we would talk about aging parents and how to care for aging parents. And I was just telling Barry that a couple of weeks ago, I found out that, that somebody that I adored, she was somebody that I met during COVID. I had asked the community I live in if there were any elderly people that were frightened and needed to isolate. This is in the very beginning when we really didn't know. Well, I mean, it was terrifying for so many people. So I did some shopping for some of my neighbors that were elderly. And she was one of the women I met. Her name was Esme Jacobson. So this is in honor of Esme. And oh my God, what a spitfire this lady was. So she died at 95. So this was, she was 90 when I met her. And fascinating woman, just incredible on so many levels. Very healthy, only ate organic food and hardly, I don't think she even ate meat because I'd only shop for her. All she wanted was organic vegetables, but sprightly and upright. And I just thought she was going to live forever. And, but just watching her, she got COVID a few months ago and it really took her down. She survived it, but it definitely, she didn't rebound she didn't rebound to who she was, her former self. So she passed away, and I was meeting with her son because I'd given her some books to read. She was fascinated in politics and spirituality and world religions and had great conversations with her. But it made me think about, how to care for our aging parents. And I think her children did the best they could, but I definitely sense they were a little lost at the end of how to take care of her, how to, the community obviously adored her and loved her and did a lot with her. But she needed more care. And in the end, she was put into a care home and she was only there for less than a couple of months before she passed. So, so Barry, we're both going to share our own experiences with our own aging parents. But just give me a brief description on you, because I know that you live in, just like me, you came to the States in the 80s and your parents were back in England. So how did you deal with them aging?
For me, and this is also because we started doing this way before there were smartphones and FaceTime stuff like that. So we did phone calls. It was actually, there was letter writing way back when, and it became phone calls. Occasionally emails, but my parents were not exactly technically savvy, so that wasn't a very successful adventure. So mostly it was phone calls. And the challenge was when my mum got sick. She was in her early 80s back in 2012, and she passed away that year. And she basically, when she got sick, it was when she got ill. It was the thing. It was called motor neuron disease, which is a kind of like Lou Gehrig's disease. It shuts down the nervous system. So basically, what happened was, pretty early on, she lost the ability to speak because her neck and chewing and stuff was not available to her anymore. So basically, I mean, it wasn't very fun. But bottom line was, verbal communication was gone. So I only got to talk to her when I went back to visit. And this is the early 2020 when she was in nursing home because my dad was old. Dad was 4 or 5 years older than her, wasn't able to take care of her, or I should say, wasn't successful in taking care of her. So when I saw her, she would write notes. Literally, she would write hand notes and give it to each other. So she could hear fine, but she couldn't articulate, which was very challenging. And that was the most heartbreaking moment for me. When she passed away, it was much less heartbreaking, which was 6 months later, because she was still in there. Like I could still see her. She's very, very bright. And it was like she was shielded behind this ability not to communicate. So it was a very strange time for me in that time. My dad, on the other hand, who frankly, and we'll talk more about this in the show, about the leadership in the family sort of thing and who's stronger. He passed away 9 years later at 95. But my sense was he stopped wanting to live. Like he basically gave up socializing, going with his friends. I mean, his friends dragged him out, after she passed away, and he basically didn't want to check anything out. He was already checked out himself until he ended up nursing home himself for the last couple of years, and then at 95 he passed away in 2021, so 9 years later. So, and my mum, I went saw her when she was sick and went back for the funeral, and my dad passed away during the pandemic, so I didn't get to go back. So I watched the funeral over Zoom, which was very strange.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like that there was care in place for them, and I mean, I never knew my father. I think
Hmm.
I met him once when I was around 30, and then not again after that.
Yeah.
So when I didn't get to witness him getting old. I didn't get to know him. I didn't get to witness him getting older. So I didn't. That was not still affected me when I heard he died. I actually couldn't believe. I actually burst into tears. It was like I didn't realize there was that an emotional little knot inside me that still had that moment of sadness.
Yeah.
I suppose because in the end it was like, okay, it's really final now. The lack of relationship. But with my mother, I was so fortunate that my younger sister was in the UK, so she really was incredible and gave my mother, she obviously stayed in our family home, and she took care of her very, very well. And but what I want to mention here is just things to prepare yourself for, because with my mother, she started getting, well, she had dementia, or, early onset, not early onset, sorry, Alzheimer's. But I think there were signs very early, and we didn't see them. We just thought mum was being difficult and being a bit, sort of forgetful and things like that. And then once she was diagnosed, we were able to go, oh my God, this has been going on for 10 years.
Mm.
There were signs of her sort of, she was a product of the war, and also grew up in a very, very poor family in Wales. But one of the signs that we thought was something not right with mum was that she would get cling film or saran wrap, and she would wash it and reuse it. She'd hang it up on a line to dry so she could reuse it, and little things like that. It was like you could just see that. Well, wait a minute, she's regressing here. But
Hmm.
I think it's what I'm bringing up is that it's really important as our parents are aging to pay attention to the small signs that maybe there is something like not just normal memory loss, but maybe a dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, and to have conversations with them before it's too late. To
Hmm.
have conversations about, start early, talk about how they envision seeing their lives as they get older. Some people are fiercely like, don't ever put me in a home. God forbid, I'd rather be, die than be put in a home. Whereas there might be other people that might think, hey, you know what, living in a community of other people my age might be, social, and might be something I might enjoy and like. So
Right.
these questions that I think are really important, while somebody still has all their faculties and they can think straight and they can
Hmm.
communicate what it is they desire for as they get older.
Yeah.
The other one is to, when you know what the plans are, to prepare financially and legally
Hmm.
for sort of the later stage in life. So, and then to also do your research about what facilities are available, what home care looks like, how much is going to cost, and
Yeah.
to maybe your parents, hopefully they have some money set aside that you can take care of those things. But again, not to be blindsided. And I think a lot of people are in denial about their parents getting older, because it doesn't matter how old we are, we're still our parents' children.
Agree.
And I think a lot of us would choose to sort of just put our head in the sand a bit and not or out of, the other thing is out of not wanting to hurt our parents, not wanting to bring the subject up before, it's like, hey, let's talk about when you're dying. It's not the most pleasant conversation to bring up. So again, delicate ways to find out what your parent what their wishes are and prepare for
Well,
them.
well, the thing is that it's not necessarily delicate as much as it is the strategy of like basically how you can still be contributing to their well-being as they go through that part of life. The thing I also want to add to this, and this is a different level, is the emotional completion. Because a lot of times what happens is we as the children, I won't say we're in denial, but we don't necessarily reconcile any outstanding agenda, upsets, wounds, history with their parents' departure. Meaning that there are things that we keep putting off that maybe we want to say to them or some completion we want to have, but we don't ever think about the fact that it's finite how much time is left for them.
Hmm.
So to take time amongst everything else you said, which I think is vitally important, the whole financial planning and setting up the right sort of stuff for their care, but also to have resolution for yourself and for them. So if you've got any old, outstanding, incomplete conversations, communications, ideally healing ones, not just to get your venting of upset out. That's not what I'm talking about here.
Yeah,
But basically,
exactly.
well, because some people carry that sort of weight. If you're doing that, go see a therapist first.
Yes. I was just about to say that this is, as your parents are aging, it's not really the time to bring out your bag of woes and
Right.
disgruntled feelings about, how they raised you. And we're not saying to be in denial about it, but as you said, Barry, seek support,
Yeah.
go into therapy, resolve these issues so that that transition can be one of peace, love, and acceptance. I mean, my
Exactly.
mother
Yeah.
made some crazy choices when I was growing up that I definitely had feelings about. I didn't address them until I was in my 30s and in therapy, because up until that point I had her on a pedestal because she was the only parent I had. But
Right.
then when I got into therapy and I started opening up about some of the choices she'd made, I had some feelings, but
Yeah.
I had completely resolved them by the time that she started to get older, to
Right.
the point where I was actually going back and living 6 months out of the year in the UK for her last 3 years of her life, because I chose to see everything good that she had done, because it wasn't all bad by any means. And I'm not saying that this is for everybody. You have to decide for yourself what feels right for you. But again, as Barry said, this is not the time to be like, oh, so you might be, dying
Right.
soon. So let me really tell you what I think of you,
No, no, what I'm actually saying instead of that is actually to, because the most common regret I think a lot of people carry around with them, especially with parents passing away, is that we didn't tell them that we loved them. We didn't tell them that we thanked them. We didn't tell them things that really are important to us, that we at the funeral, even months later, we know it's like, oh, I wish I'd said, I'd missed the opportunity. All these different things that come up for us. So I'm suggesting that not saying you should do it so early that they've still got 10 more years, but if you know that something's happening, or you realize that your parent is mentally checking out, is to do your best to have a communication. So hopefully, what you want to share with them lands with them, so they hear it. Because frankly, for most of us, we probably have less than complete gratitude for our parents' voice with them, meaning that we haven't said what we really want to say. We've become assumptive. We don't say I love you to our parents because we thought we've said it enough. We don't need to say it anymore. But the truth is, after they're gone, we don't have that ability.
that's not the case in my family at
Oh
all.
no,
We
I'm saying to people.
I think I told my mum I loved her all the time. Even when I was cross with her, I still managed to say I love you. We were just a very passionate, demonstrative family. So yeah, I think start now. Start telling your parents. And I think the other thing you hit on, I think what happens is that it's, we often see we don't see our parents as human, just humans, regular people. They are in a role, and we will always view them through that lens of the child, or
Yeah,
the child of, even when you're an adult. And sometimes our expectations or our limitations, um, on who they are as people, is so constricted by this, as I say, this view of them as our parents, not as a separate human being that has a completely other life outside of being your parent.
oh yeah,
I think when we are aware of that, and we can look at them and really see that, they weren't gods. They did do the best they could. Maybe they could have done better. It doesn't mean that that their parenting maybe was adequate, but I don't think. I mean, I'm stealing a Ron Holnick thing quote here. I remember him saying, "No parent wakes up in the morning and says, 'I really want to be the worst parent ever today.'" It's like we don't. We do our best and we fail and we get up and we own our mistakes and we just try harder.
Yeah.
But yes, that going back to what you said, that I think when you have the conversation, like, okay, so I'm 65. So if my children were to say to me, how do you want to sort of spend the rest of your life? Or what happens if you get older? I've made it very clear to my children that if I'm mentally aware, then I would like to stay in my home as long as possible.
Hmm.
But if I lose my mind and I'm not there as the mother you knew, then please, yes, please put me in a home, check on me, make sure I'm not being abused, and that it's a good home. But I don't want to inflict that on my children. If I've lost my mind, I don't want my children to have to care for me on that level. It can be incredibly challenging. Often with dementia, there can be some people behave aggressively. It's fear. It's that time in between when they are first aware, or maybe they've even had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or whatever, that they're aware that they are not themselves. And I witnessed that with my mother. And again, as I said, my younger sister was incredible with her, but there was also a little bit of a level of frustration, like, no, mum, it's not that way, it's this. And I just thought, go along with her. What does it
Yeah.
matter if it's right or wrong? It doesn't matter, because I could see my mother processing that, and I could see this panic on her face of, oh my God, I said the wrong thing, or I was wrong, or there's something wrong with me. And that was extremely painful to witness. So if they're repeating the same story 100 times, my mum would say, have I told you this one already? And I go, no, mum. And I've probably heard 10 times that day already, but
Yeah.
she just had a little, I call it like a filing cabinet. She had about 10 stories she liked to sort of rotate through, but that they were stories from the past, and that's what it was the other thing I want to mention too. It's if you look at it through the lens of they took care of you when you were vulnerable, naked, born into the world, dependent on them. It's a flipping of roles.
Hmm.
And you can look at it as an opportunity to give back what they gave to you as a small child or as a baby, that you get to nurture and love them and care for them as they're getting older and more vulnerable and scared and alone. So,
Well, that's within the caveat. I want another caveat I put on this, which basically is because I know some clients and friends that basically they have no relationship with their parents whatsoever because there was not a healthy upbringing. So we are putting this in the context of a relationship where you still have some connection with them that is somewhat loving in some frame that you can still access. Because if you got nothing there, then it may not be maybe not anything you can actually do about it. Yes, you might desire as a mission for yourself to find reconnection with them for your own fulfillment, not necessarily for them, but they will get benefit ideally as well. But obviously, if you've gone through upbringing with family that was very abusive or challenging that made a lot of life not worth being with them, and you've left that place, we're not saying you should go back and revisit just to make that sort of work out. But if you do have something to complete, to heal, to resolve, and yes, if you want to not be in a place where you're going to be yelling at your parents, again, go seek therapy. But where you actually can do something that is more additive, that can be fulfilling for you and for them. Because wouldn't you want to be at peace when they pass?
mhm,
I mean, it's as simply as that. If you want to have a completion, a resolution with your family, your parents, so that you can feel that when they pass, you've done everything you needed to do, everything you could do to be at peace, so you can feel clear. Yes, grief is going to happen. That's what happens when you lose something or lose somebody. but it's not based on regret and things you didn't get to do.
Mm-hmm.
You've actually done that, so you feel like, okay, I did everything I need to do. I'm whole that way, and I will miss them, whatever level that is. But it's from a place of wholeness. That would be ideal.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I've had quite a few clients I've worked with that, because my mother was definitely narcissistic,
Oh yeah,
and 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 was negligent and abusive. I mean, there was definitely all of that there too. And I would have clients come to me and say, "Oh my God, the fact that you reached a level of peace and love with your mother towards the end," and they'll say things like, "I will never get there. I can't get." And I know at least two clients that have, through working through their feelings, their issues, that and understanding what it, you know, the impact of having a narcissistic parent is, and but they healed. And both the clients I'm just thinking of right now, their parents recently passed, and they were so grateful that they had done the healing work that that when their parent passed on, they didn't have there wasn't that residue of anger
hmm
and pain, that they had come full circle. They were able to see their parent as a damaged, flawed human being, as many of us are, and that within their capacity, they did do the best they could, and they were able to let go with peace and care for them as well. And also, that's the other thing I want to say is, don't be a hero. You don't have to take it all on yourself. You can get resources, really educate yourself. And as I said, I mean, Esme's sons definitely pulled in the community, took our numbers, asked for our help when they weren't around, if we'd be on call and things like that. And she enjoyed it. She enjoyed visits. She enjoyed different people popping in to see her, and so it's the planning, it's the preparing. As I said, burnout is a huge one. Make sure that you're absolutely taking care of yourself, that you have the support, like we said earlier, of
yeah,
maybe a therapist, not to just deal with sort of maybe some unresolved issues, but to deal with the grieving process. I mean, to be really honest, I didn't grieve when my mother passed.
hmm
I just didn't. It was, well, number one, I sort of she died literally in my arms and my sister's arms. We were all holding on to her as she passed, and I definitely felt her spirit leave her body, but was very present. So I didn't really feel like that I'd lost her. It was a very interesting feeling, and it lasted for a few days that I felt that she was right with me. Um, but I think there was so much done while she was alive that it was just a natural progression, and it was sweet. And yes, I mean, when I think about it, I miss the conversations because we would have our Sunday calls every Sunday for all of those years. Um, but I think, and again, I was in therapy, so I think having that support, having other family members, and yeah, just don't do it all alone, and don't be a hero. And if there is resentment in there, take care of it and take care of yourself, and do what you can do with an open heart.
yeah,
There's,
yes.
not with the musts and the shoulds and I have to and what do other people think. No, do what's right for you, but at the same time, if you can, look at them with you know see them as a whole person, not just as a parent, a whole person that may have struggled equally so with their parents.
Well, the thing, I'm going to make this sound simplistic in a sense because it really is that way, is that if it wasn't for your parents, you wouldn't be here.
Mhm.
So, if nothing else, I hope you feel gratitude for the fact that they were the vessel through which you came to be here on the planet. And if you can have that much gratitude, that's a place to start. You have
Yeah.
to have like gratitude for everything because, frankly, yes, a lot of people, a lot of parents weren't the best parents they could be because they didn't know better. Frankly, if you look
Mhm.
back with really clear eyes, and we talked about this on other shows, that the patterns that we inherit from our parents didn't come from them; it came through them from their parents and their parents before that. So there is lineages of maybe abusive or negligent or challenging patterns that we inherited or we visited upon by our parents.
Mhm.
So we may not be happy with the way we were raised by our parents, but in some part of us, I hope, even a small part of us, we can see through the lens of it wasn't their fault. They just didn't know better. Because frankly, all of us, we know if we knew better, we would do better. So we did the best we can with what we know how. And our parents did the same thing. And if we can reconcile and see through that lens that whatever happened, we are here.
Mm.
And hopefully our lives are going okay and that we take care of ourselves. So when we look for our parents, no matter how good or bad it was, we can at least see through that place of compassion and care for them. Because maybe they had so much they went through, but didn't have the skills we have now to work through our process, didn't have therapy or whatever it was back then, perhaps. And so having some level of compassion for our parents, either one or both, can bring it takes a long way to having a sense of peace with them, that we don't keep blaming and judging and everything else we do to our parents when we don't feel happy in ourselves.
Yeah. And if we even take it a step further, and some of us believe that we choose our parents and our family of origin to come into, and I definitely believe in that. I definitely I had a huge awareness the other day. I was in this sound bath, and it was just so clear to me that I chose to come into the world through two parents that I won't say my mother didn't love me. She definitely did. She just had some emotional issues of her own. But
Mhm.
certainly having a father that didn't have the capacity to love was by choice. I mean, it definitely set me on the road that I'm on in my life, where I help other people and things like that. The other thing I just wanted to talk about again, and on a practical level, is um, just remember to treat your parents with dignity.
Mhm.
And they've been independent all their life, and it must be so hard to be independent and to not have to rely on other people so much, to then get to a place where you're completely vulnerable. And as well as the frustration that comes with that, there's such a loss of their independence.
Yeah.
And I think, too, even if you are irritated, just just remember that we all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
Mhm.
I think that's very important. As we mentioned, get all the emotional support that you can ahead of time. Don't wait for your parent to pass and then all of a sudden reach out for help from a therapist. Help during that, knowing what's inevitable.
Mhm.
Um, so I think, and knowing, again, even if it's not your parents' wish to ever be put in a home, if it comes to a point, as I said, where it's just too difficult, too challenging, and they can't be cared for within their own home, that might be a choice you have to make, and to not
Mhm.
feel guilty over it, as long as you've done the best to honor their wishes and respect their wishes. But at the same point, you can't. I know so many people that are so burnt out at the end of their parents' life. And they feel guilty because they were actually wishing that their parents would die because of the burden of it
Mhm.
instead of getting the support. So then they felt guilty that the parent died. So
Right.
avoid all these things before it gets that bad.
Yeah. If you can take the time to, again, seek therapy or see one of us for guidance, so do the work that will help you come to peace and resolution with them before they leave, is a wonderful gift you give yourself. And frankly, you give them, because even if you don't talk to them, the energy you're putting out is not as barbed and sharp as it may have been before.
Yeah.
So this reminder in this conversation is really that time's going to march on. What you do with it is up to you.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And just again, on a practical note, be prepared for emergencies. Make sure that, if it is one of those little things that your parent slips and falls and can call an emergency or something like that. My mother passed away from a fall. She was taking her jumper off and she got all in a, as we'd say in Welsh, a caggle, and she lost her balance and fell over backwards and hit her head on a radiator and had a brain bleed. But fortunately, my younger sister was there, and so we were able to call an ambulance and get her to the hospital. But unfortunately, given her age, given her level of dementia, they just said that she probably would not survive the operation, and if she did, she would be very traumatized. She was already getting very confused and angry with her confusion, and so it was just a natural course of events. But again, just make sure that they're safe and as well cared for and respected and honored for both of you, for everybody's sake.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I was going to add, just a PS that is also make sure you are also safe and taken care of, because
Mhm.
it's, as you said as well about when your dad passed, was that we never know how we're going to feel after they go.
Mhm.
So to take steps to support yourself, to get emotional support, to find resources to give yourself the comfort, because you never know what's going to happen in terms of how you're going to feel after they do go, because it'll happen. And so finding peace inside yourself, high on your list of priorities, I would recommend.
That's a lovely note to end it on. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Barry, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Yes. And if you thoughts about this, please let us know. If you've been through this or you're going through this, please let us know. We'd like to know more about your experience too.
Yes, that's wonderful.
All right.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.